Welcome to Simple Healthy Life, where our goal is to have real, insightful discussions on topics that we find interesting. And today, I'm super excited because we have Brian Huggins here, and he is the owner of Fairhaven Wellness, and he has an incredible mind and does all sorts of different, more holistic kind of remedies for muscular imbalances and really kind of like a wide spectrum of I don't want to call them disorders, but maybe comorbidities of some kind. And so I don't know if that did it particular justice, but
Well, basically what I do is I work a lot with pain.
yeah.
And so there's always a reason why pain is happening. And I've just had a lot of different trainings and have a lot of different assessment skills to try to get to the root of an issue.
Mm.
So it's all about the root. If you don't get to the root of an issue, you don't get the results. It's the same thing in your field, you as a dietitian,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah. It is interesting because like much of modern modern medicine is tackling just the symptoms, and then the
yep,
root isn't solved, and
that's
so
right.
then the symptoms are come back every
Yeah.
time, and then you have to take medicines and all that consistently.
Jump
So
through a lot of hoops.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then, what is it that, and we'll just kind of start like basic kind of stuff, and then we'll dive into the very interesting topics. But what is it
Sure.
that you offer, kind of at Fairhaven Wellness, just a bit of
Um,
background?
so I've got a few different practitioners in my office. So my wife, she does tapping,
Mm.
um, and it's just like emotional freedom technique, and it just deals a lot with emotional trauma. I find that I've actually had to do it, and I used to suffer with depression, and it completely resolved my depression.
Mm.
And so you find people who have had a lot of emotional trauma as children, it sort of sets different pathways in their brain. You like for instance, like if you see somebody who's so uber talented,
Yeah.
yet they're always self-sabotaging, right? They just can't get out of their own way. You think they want to be like that? No. It's like literally neural pathways that are just like locked. And so I find that a lot of that's rooted in subconscious.
Yeah.
And so that's just a technique for addressing the subconscious because we can talk all day about issues,
Right.
doesn't always fix them. So if you can address the subconscious, that's where the magic happens with that. Also, I've got a massage therapist that is like a therapeutic deep tissue practitioner.
Mm.
He's absolutely incredible. That's where I send a lot of my massage clients, even though I do massage as well, but I like to work on the more dysfunctional cases.
Sure.
And then also, I have an acupuncturist
Oh,
who's
you do.
a retired nurse practitioner, and she's amazing. She just worked on me yesterday for a shoulder issue I was having, and it
Really?
just like, she's amazing.
Oh.
Um, and then myself, I do Tuina, which is a Chinese medical massage. I also do neurokinetic therapy, which is sort of what we were talking about with it's an elaborate muscle testing system that deals with motor control theory. And like I was mentioning, with any injury, your cerebellum is going to downregulate certain muscles and upregulate other muscles to compensate so that that muscle can actually heal, right? So I deal with that and correcting dysfunctional motor control patterns. And then I also do ANF therapy, which stands for amino neural frequency therapy. And that deals with inflammation. And anytime you've got inflammation in a nerve or a tissue or a structure, that inflammation is preventing the nervous system from communicating to the muscles. And so, like I've got videos upon videos of somebody walking in with a boot with an ankle sprain, right? Their ligaments have tearing, right? So I'll
Mm.
put the discs on the ligaments and all the pain, and within 15, 20 minutes, they're walking without a boot and they're just like blown away. Like I work with
Wow.
a ton of athletes. I work with a lot of basketball players out of Boston, really high level AAU travel teams.
Yeah.
But I can work with gut inflammation too.
Yeah.
I can work with bulging discs. I've got a ton of cases where people have had injections and physical therapy and they just weren't quite getting the results. And so what ANF has taught me is palpation skills. So if I can find the majority of the inflammation and make that inflammation go away using the ANF discs, your pain is gone and it restores movement. It's
Wow.
amazing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. That is incredible. And just to jump in before you, MJ, I mean, when I used to hear a lot of these kind of like holistic, I mean, I don't even know if I call it holistic, but it's certainly different than what you typically run into. You go to the primary care and they say, well, take this medication. And so it's like, medical doctors are trained in pharmaceuticals, and that's really it. And it just so happens that that's the mainstream, and we could go all day long about
Yeah.
that, but we'll stay away from that exact subject. But what you're talking about really is inflammation, and especially, I know that to be the etiology of a lot of issues that
It's the
we
roots.
have. And yeah, like you said, it's the roots, whether that's, strictly speaking, like nutrition or like muscular. It seems that inflammation on this like more micro and systematic level is really the root issue
Yeah.
to a
Yeah,
lot of
it is.
problems.
It's really the root behind all diseases.
Hmm.
And so whether it be systemic and like what's the contributing factor, what's going to be generating that inflammation, that can be the hard part, you know.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, with the ANF therapy, I can treat all the organs. So I have discs that are specifically to the organs. And I should kind of tell you a little bit about like the technology.
Yeah.
And so inside of the ANF discs, there's a carbonized alloy,
Hmm.
and it's a pure metal that was developed by NASA.
Hmm.
And they can take the metal and put it into like a frequency generator and then charge that disc with particular frequencies.
Mm.
So all of our frequencies have been measured. It's been for over
Yeah.
100 years now. Like when you get an EKG, they're looking at the 4 different frequencies of the heart,
Mm.
right? And so they can all be recreated and stored into these discs. And when I put the disc on you, your body heat activates the disc, and then your nervous system picks up the signal and it helps to strengthen signalization. So it's proprietary knowledge. I couldn't tell you what's in every disc. All I
Sure.
do is I know how to use them very well. I've
Yeah.
been doing it since 2016.
Mm.
And yeah, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had a woman with frozen shoulder one time.
Yeah.
She had it for over 3 years, and she tried everything. She did surgery where they break up the capsule. She's done PT, injections, nothing touched it. And so when I went to feel her shoulder, there was literally no inflammation in the shoulder. And so I can do through muscle testing, I can check different acupuncture points, which are known as shoe points. So like windows into the organs. And so I was checking her liver shoe points, and her liver was off.
Mm.
And so I literally put 5 ANF discs on her liver, and within 2 minutes, I'm like, go ahead and see if you can move your arm. She just went like,
Oh,
what the
wow.
fuck? She was totally blown
That's
away. But yeah,
wild.
it took literally 5 minutes from the time we started to the time it resolved, and it never came back.
Wow.
So,
2 years of dysfunction disappeared in 5 minutes.
wow,
That was one of my favorite cases.
I have so many questions. I think so. First, I'd love to know a little bit more about you and like how you got into this. And it sounds like I love that you're talking about the mind and the body and the nervous system.
Yeah.
Treating the whole person.
Mhm.
And I think that really intrigues me because that's the way that I like to think as well. But tell us a little bit about you and like how you got into. I
Well-
guess it sounded like you started with what was the first
Massage.
massage? Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've done a lot. So my father had cancer in the early 2000s, or 1990s.
Hmm.
And so I was taking him to Chinatown, Boston. And we were living in Connecticut at the time. And so he was being treated with traditional Chinese medicine from Tom Tam. He's a very famous traditional Chinese medicine doctor, acupuncture. And he also developed a modality called Tongren therapy, which is long distance healing. And I can talk about that for an hour. But so anyway, that's sort of where that journey began. And so I would sit in on the sessions and watch what he was doing. And then coincidentally, a friend of my father had bought him a massage table. Like, oh, you got cancer? Here's a massage table, right? Like, so it was just like it was
You
meant
might
to
need
happen,
this.
right?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
very serendipitous.
Wow.
And so then I would treat my father, and I would go to Chinatown, and he was like, "Man, you were really good at this. Like, And so, well, he passed away, blah, blah, blah. And a few years later, I started studying Chinese medicine in China, and not in Chinatown, but in Boston at Charles River School of Shiatsu. And then it closed like halfway through.
Yeah.
So that I took another sabbatical for another few years, and then my brother got cancer, and I started treating him. He was like, "I'm in so much pain. Can you just like come and give me a rub?" He knew I was good at it,
Yeah.
and so then I would treat him like a couple times a week, and he was like, "Brian, you need to do this," like, because he had gone to see a lot of the people that I learned from, and he's like, "You're better than them," at the massage.
Yeah.
They had more knowledge, obviously, but so then I was like, you know what, man, you're right. And so that's where I started getting into massage. I went to school, got my license for massage therapy, and a friend of mine who I was working with in Boston, she was like, "Hey, I know this really, really great healer named Santosh, and he's a Nepalese healer, and he's based out of Cambridge. He owns Om Namo Center." And so then I started to work with him, and every Wednesday we would do trainings. And I started learning about treating people from a biomechanical standpoint. And so that he would implement muscle testing in that. And so then I'm like, I need to study muscle testing. I want to learn all the tests. And so that's where I started learning neurokinetic therapy. And that is an amazing therapy. I don't believe we were talking about that on camera, but I believe
No.
we were sort of having the discussion.
Yeah.
And that's muscle testing based on motor control theory.
Can you
So-
can you give a little bit more about that? Because I'm interested, and I think
it's
other
an
people will be
amazing
interested
it's
too.
an amazing assessment technique. And so neurokinetic therapy, it's very sophisticated muscle testing. And like I was saying, whenever there's a muscle not firing, it's because your cerebellum is choosing to recruit other muscles.
Mm.
And so let's say I'm performing a muscle test for your hamstrings. If your hamstring's not firing, it's because your cerebellum's recruiting another muscle. So if I touch that muscle and hold it while I muscle test you, all of a sudden your hamstring goes strong. So, and the reason behind that is because if you touch a facilitated muscle, it's too much afferent input for the brain. And so then your brain's going to skip the compensator and actually allow for the muscle you're testing to fire.
Mm.
So, if you could, as dumb that down one more step and talk about how the example you kind of gave earlier to me was like, if you hurt your foot, whatever, you can change your gait.
Yep.
Like, so the body,
You're going to
said
reroute
something-
motor control
The
pattern.
body does that though. You don't
nervous
do
system.
it. The nervous system. That was the
Mhm.
word you used.
Yeah.
So, is that essentially what you're saying here? Like,
Yeah.
when something hurts, your system is compensating so much that you're not actually in control of how it compensates.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a baby learning to walk. Every time that baby falls, the cerebellum opens up, the motor control cortex, and it'll start to reroute motor control patterning until eventually that child can learn to walk
Mm.
correctly without falling down.
Mhm.
Right? It's all motor control. He's not consciously aware of, I got to engage my hamstring more.
Right.
Oh, I got to engage this more. No, it's all motor control. And so you never lose that ability. And so when I perform a muscle test and it fails, the cerebellum opens up. And so then I can sort of what they call TL, which stands for therapy localization. So let's say I'm doing a hamstring test and it's failing. I would say 80% of the time it's because your peroneals are facilitated. And so it's a kinetic chain, right? So if I touch the peroneals and then test the hamstring will test strong a lot of times if that's the facilitator.
Mm.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
And so I use that as an assessment tool. And so a lot of times, well, why isn't a muscle firing properly as well? As a lot of time there's inflammation in the nerves. So I combine the ANF therapy and the NKT therapy. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They go together so well.
so the NKT, that neurokinetic therapy,
Mm-hmm.
that's essentially mind body.
Yep.
And now you're taking the same concept and kind of expanding on it for the AMF.
ANF, yeah.
ANF, yeah.
Mhm.
So now I'm getting there. If you could now.
Okay, so
what happens
the
next?
peroneals are facilitated, right?
Yeah.
If I touch the common peroneal nerve, it's usually there's inflammation in there. And so if I put discs and remove the inflammation, all of a sudden the hamstrings go strong. So it's almost like a hack. It's like a cheat
Mm.
code, you
Yeah.
know. So I studied with Dr. McKelhoff, who is the founder of ANF therapy and has developed all the discs and all the protocols.
Yeah.
Mad genius.
Yeah.
And I was telling him what I do with the neurokinetic therapy, and he was like, I don't believe in that. I'm like, I used it before I did this, and I had great success. But he's like, Brian, what controls the muscles? The nerves. So I just find nerves tend to be at the root of all dysfunction and all inflammation. Nerves carry in the inflammation, they carry it out, they signal hormonal production. It's all generated by your nervous system.
Absolutely.
It's so interesting because I mean, a lot of a lot of things that you're saying. Yeah, I think it's nice to have the scientific kind of like background there or the physiology background there, but I also can resonate with that just intuitively, right? Like I do a lot of sitting just because I have to be sitting as I talk with people, and then I do a lot of jujitsu, and all of that kind of locks up my hips, and I actively recognize that if I'm just like sitting here right now, I almost have to consciously relax my hip because there is something subconscious that keeps that hip locked, and whether
Yeah.
that's like just because there's some muscular imbalance, which I think is probably certainly the case, and there's also this, if I have the ability to relax it consciously through a lot of effort, don't get me wrong, it's like it's actually hard to do that. um, there must be that across the spectrum of people must experience these kinds of like locked muscle groups on a regular basis just from the way they live their lives.
Overuse.
Yeah,
Somebody at a desk all day and they're typing all day.
right.
You need to do the reverse of that
Yeah.
because you form discrepancies between the antagonistic muscles.
Right, right. So, it's interesting, and of course, like I know we always like to do a little research on the subjects that we talk about. But I went, you had mentioned like emotional freedom technique, which is pretty cool, and we'll probably come back to that. Which is surprisingly like a very it's as holistic as it gets in terms of like treatments for all sorts of things, and I think that that mainly focuses on like kind of like the mental health, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But what I found in terms of the studies of emotional freedom technique, they're remarkable. They really are. They're like the scientific evidence behind like the way
Yeah.
that it can relieve symptoms of PTSD and depression,
It's
anxiety.
amazing.
It really is, and it's out there. This information. I mean, you search it on a scholarly database, and you're going to find
Yeah.
the evidence. Yet no one talks about it. And
It's because there's no drugs involved.
Mhm.
You don't need to be a doctor in order to do it.
Mm.
So actually, speaking of how effective it can be, my wife was treating a woman who had fibromyalgia.
Mm.
She couldn't, afraid to leave the house. And I'm talking in like 2 months, the woman was all better.
Wow.
Yeah, no more pain. And she's
Amazing.
actually like traveling the world now and living her best life.
That's
And
crazy.
she's in like well into her 60s.
Right.
So
Wow.
literally for 20, 30 years, this woman has been in excruciating pain and like literally went away. It was all emotional.
Wow. Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's like this information is out there, and it takes people like you to say, well, I mean, we could try this,
Right.
and no one's saying that any of these things have to, displace traditional
There's
medicine.
room for everything. It wouldn't
Yeah.
exist if there wasn't
Right.
if there wasn't a place for it.
Right, right. And even with the ANF, the amino neural frequency, is that
Hmm.
correct? Yeah. Some studies on that too. They're showing. I think there was one that I read that they went around to 113 different PT clinics who I guess like have this in place. I'm not sure how common it actually is, but they found 103 of them to have the majority of their patients, clients reported significant improvement in their actual.
And fast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Fast.
just as a personal anecdote, like I went into you a couple of maybe like a year or two back,
Hmm.
every now and again,
Yeah.
and it's funny, like I couldn't move, my hips super locked up, my psoas super tight, and you kind of did a number of tests, and I think was that the NKT stuff that
The
you're
muscle
talking.
testing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you would like put pressure on a specific muscle, and then that would like activate or not activate as whatever muscle. But you were kind of, it was very interesting to me because you were very intentional about
It's very
whatever it was.
concise.
Yeah. And so it wasn't like willy-nilly. Like you were probably the most intentional provider I think I've ever been to. And it was so cool to see the process. And so you're doing all these tests and you're like, yep, I think it's that. And then you confirmed it through another test. I'm like, okay, sure, I guess. But then you then took these discs, these these ANF discs, and like kind of like you said, they have this like frequency, and you kind of explained that to me. And the frequency communicates to the nerve, and that activates it and whatnot, which I think is understandable. And then part of me was like, huh, I've never seen that before. I don't know if this is gonna work. And and so you put these discs, and I want to get into how you choose them because I've always had that question for you. But again, very intentional about how he chooses these discs. Yeah. And then so you're super intentional. Then you put them in the spot, and then like no joke, like it worked. Like I immediately felt better, and I could immediately do movements that I couldn't do walking in. And
your wife confirmed that. She said he's moving his hips. Like I've never seen him like do that before.
The last time I went in, the night before, I did a hamstring stretch. I said, all right, I'm going to test this. And I literally measured, I roughly measured how much I could do like the split kind of motion. Went in, got some discs. That night, splits like you'd never seen it before. And Alicia witnessed this. She saw it. It was really wild. So could you, all that being said, could you kind of talk about the intentionality, maybe specifically around like the disc?
Yeah, so there's a few different types of discs. There's pain and inflammation discs. There's antioxidant discs. There's emotional discs. And then there's discs more for like fluid discs, like spinal discs, blood sugar. The ones that have they're more like the endocrine system. There's like more towards the endocrine system. But the way I choose the discs, I actually combine them quite a bit, but they work in wavelength. So if I'm palpating a muscle or a nerve that's really, really painful, if I'm barely putting any pressure, I'll choose a weak disc. And they work in different strengths, and it's all based on wavelengths. So it depends on how hard I have to push is going to determine what disc I use. And then I'll combine them to form protocols. So I'll put pain and inflammation, and then I'll put antioxidants. And if I find that there's a muscle that's really, really tight, I'll put an emotional disc. But it's not really, it's more like it's calming down the nervous system. So I'll put like they call it medical calm. So I'll calm down a muscle so that'll relax, take any pressure off the nerve.
Wow. Yeah, that is incredible. Yeah, I mean, have you ever done anything like that?
Oh, with the discs?
Yeah.
No. Nope. Not yet. This has got my mind like.
Hey, listen, I have got like if you checked out like my reviews and whatnot,
No.
I like people who are like hopeless. They've tried everything, and it's like it's not going to be like that for everybody. I find more often than not you need to exercise. That's people are getting pain because they're weak. But sometimes it's a catch-22. Like I'm so much pain I can't work out, but if I work out, it just causes so much pain, right? So that's where the discs and the NKT are so effective because I can reestablish proper motor control, proper movement, and then I take the discs and I remove all the inflammation. Because what is pain? Inflammation. Take away the inflammation, you take away the pain.
The logic is just so
and then you start
good.
working out. And then you start working out. So as part of neurokinetic therapy, you didn't get into that situation in a day. So you have to reestablish proper motor control patterning by releasing the facilitator and strengthening the muscle that was inhibited. So I do that, and I send people corrective exercises. So I add in exercises. Sometimes massage is really what you need too. So I just combine it all. And I actually have another practice that I didn't tell you guys about, which is FSM, which stands for frequency specific microcurrent. I've healed people of autoimmune with that. I worked with your wife a little bit with the IBS, whatever. I don't need to go there, but and as well as like fibromyalgia post-op. And so it's widely used in like the NFL. Um, that is a really great therapy. It doesn't work as quickly as the ANF, so I kind of tend to go more towards speed and efficiency. But like I had a woman with fibromyalgia. I've had a few people with fibromyalgia, and within 6 weeks, they're all better.
Wow,
hmm
incredible.
It's amazing.
I'm just keep being blown away by this conversation for so many ways,
Yeah.
so many reasons that it seems like you were meant to sit here, and I was lucky enough to hear it all. But let's just think about the stuff we've talked about recently. Just like number one comes to mind, passion.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right.
I mean, here he is,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're clearly passionate about
Oh,
it.
I love it.
You started from a place that, I mean, I think if I was gonna, it was a very tough place, right? Your
Yeah.
dad was dying, and you
Yeah.
literally started like, there's no more passionate way to start something than to say, I'm gonna heal my loved one. I'm gonna help my loved one.
Yeah.
And then you grew through, and the thing that I really appreciate is like you grew through the mind body, right? And I'm studying that now. And for those of you that know, listen, right, very much working that direction through mind body. And then I personally went through breath work. And really,
amazing.
like when you talk about releasing emotion and tapping, right? I mean, I've told the story on the podcast 10 times. My changing my life was through breath work.
Yeah.
And that's emotional release
It
out
is.
of the body.
It's tuning into your nervous system.
And that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Last
Mhm.
night, I was fortunate enough to give a talk to a bunch of high schoolers about how you can use your breath to control your parasympathetic nervous system when you have times anxiety, really helping you physically change the way that you feel.
Yeah.
And now here I am today hearing like the next level of it all kind of, and it's all resonating, pun intended, I guess, in my brain. And it's all kind of coming together at the same time for me. So I'm probably not doing the best job being a host. I'm just trying to get it all in as quickly as I can.
It's a sort of a foreign concept with what I'm talking about because it's not widely practiced
Right.
here. So when people are hearing frequencies, they're like, what does that mean?
Right.
But everything is frequencies, and the way our nervous system operates through neural oscillation. And so it's all nerve synapses generated in the brain, and it's an intricate network of nerves, And so, like what I was saying, is inflammation is at the root of all disease, right? So when you get inflammation into a nerve or a tissue, it downregulates the nerve's ability to communicate to the muscle. It's just like basically clogging the pathways. And so the discs just upregulate and deliver the correct signal to the nerve that is being downregulated by the inflammation. And so when you do that, like it just clears up situations very quickly.
Yeah. I think it's so cool. I mean, health, as I understand it, and I think I understand it better than most, maybe. And that's not to blow my own horn or whatever, but it really comes down to the body has the ability to heal itself. The body was made to have its own systems intact and fix any issues that come about. And most, kind of like we were talking about, I can't even remember if it was before or during the podcast, but most health issues, the etiology is inflammation, and not the kind of inflammation, like I hurt my ankle and now it's super inflamed. Like that is one version of it, but there's this kind of like systemic inflammation that happens, and our body is capable of producing antioxidants and producing these things that then neutralize the inflammation and bring this down.
Oxidative stress. Yeah.
Exactly. However, there is balance required. We need balance in our lives to be able to have that system function appropriately. And so, if someone's, for example, in the movement department, if you're sitting all day, you're out of balance.
Yep.
If you're eating one particular food a lot, you're out of balance. And specifically when it comes to nutrition, obviously we get in a lot of antioxidants through nutrition. But you need to have different types of foods to hit each pathway. There's antioxidants that the body uses and takes in for specifically nerves, or for specifically the heart muscle, or for specifically the brain health. And so it really is important to get in this type of balance. And what you talk about is kind of hitting that inflammation in a very intentional way, and then the next step is to fix the lifestyle
Yeah.
that yielded to that, or
Yep.
that led to it.
Yep.
And so when someone comes in and says, "Hey, Brian, I have this issue," you say, "Okay," you determine what therapy modality that they require, and then
Mhm.
you kind of say, "Well, here's the next step." Kind
Yep.
of. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. That's amazing. So then, what's it been like to run Fairhaven Wellness? I mean, how has that been for you? Because I know that's
I mean, I love being on my own. I love
yeah,
being my own boss.
yeah,
I mean, I have been for a while. I worked with a sports chiropractor,
yeah,
an amazing one.
yeah.
I'll give him a little plug, Crab
Yeah, Dr.
Chiropractic.
Crab, yeah,
You know,
please
he's
do.
he's the man.
He is.
And so I worked in his office for probably about 5 years.
Mhm.
And then I just decided I wanted to grow. You know, I wanted to maybe have an employee or two and try to make a little bit more money. You know, got a family to support.
Yeah.
So then I opened up Fairhaven Wellness, and it's been amazing. I'm not the best businessman because I'm really more focused on the clients.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
so I think it's just going to allow me to get into more of what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm busy. You know, I just need to get my other people busy and grow. So I'm actually focusing on that part of it now, is growing the other side of the business.
Right.
You know, so I'd like to train people, get them, you know, people who have the passion to heal, that are naturals at it. I'd love to be able to help give them the tools and sort of have, you know, expand the practice that way. People don't necessarily always have to work with me. I can get other practitioners in there and make a little bit of money. So
Yeah.
For sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, we've had conversations recently on like entrepreneurship and passion, and
yeah,
you know, it's actually fitting that we've had those almost in a row, and then you come on, and you know, we've said in the passion podcast where we discussed that, like, it comes through, like, to see someone passionate, it's like, it's super cool,
it's
right?
refreshing, right?
Yeah, and that comes through for you. It's super cool. And the whiskey guy that was mentioned, you know, in the previous podcast, it's, you know, all of that is super intriguing.
Mm.
So then let me ask you this: what can't like NKT or ANF help with?
I find, let's say you're bone on bone, your knee's like totally shot,
Yeah.
and your ligaments are destroyed, and that's not going to fix that.
Yeah,
You know, you're going to need surgery.
yeah,
I've worked with bulging discs, herniated discs. Bulging discs are kind of easy to work with, actually. Herniated discs, on the other hand, it's a ruptured disc. It can help, but it just takes a little bit more time. Yeah, I would say people who are bone on bone with like their knees or their hips, like surgery or stem cells are in your future. You know.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. And then how do people prevent these things from occurring? I mean, we kind of talked about like the balance and stuff,
Mhm.
but when you talk about more like mm, I suppose the movement or the PT kind of exercises, what do you typically recommend in terms of like just general like lifestyle? How should people just generally
Eat
live
well.
their life?
Stay away from processed foods.
Mhm.
Stay away from sugar, which is the devil. Um,
You know how you know it's the devil?
no, tell me.
I've never seen a single commercial claiming it's the devil.
I
Right.
like that.
Everything
I like
else
that.
in our
I like
society,
that.
they're like,
I
don't eat
know.
red meat, don't have eggs,
I
don't drink
know.
milk.
I know. I'm a huge Gary Brecka follower. Like, I love him and Paul Sardina. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
But yeah, so eating well, eating healthy, balance,
Mhm.
stay away from sugar, get rest, try to have fun, have meaningful relationships in your life, you know, and exercise, really, you know.
Yeah. What type of exercise should people do if they're, and I know it's like kind of hard to describe, like, get down and show me.
Well, you know, like, so if somebody has a very specific injury, and I'll give them corrective exercises based on what I found.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times it's just more of an activation. It's not like you're not using weights. You're not trying to build strength. You're not trying to get jacked,
Yeah.
and you're just really trying to reestablish proper motor control
Mm.
sequence. So,
Yeah.
but outside of that, like, I like to run. You know, I just started running again, hitting the gym. You know, But I like functional strength training's good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big component of that. And
Yeah, and I like the point too about not making it like so you're trying to just gain as much muscle as possible, because that actually
it's
that's
not functional.
imbalance.
It's
Yeah.
not functional. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, when I did that many years ago, I definitely developed muscular imbalances
Yeah.
just by virtue of, if you're targeting specific groups, something is being missed and you're not hitting exactly something, and over time the imbalance will get greater and greater and greater, and then you're going to have issues with those specific muscles, which then you can go see you, get the A&F therapy
Yep.
to maybe like release, what do you call it? Release a facilitator muscle. Can you?
So when a muscle's not firing properly, it shortens and tightens. So like just say like your muscle's not firing well, if the nervous system was just allowing it to stretch, it would eventually tear.
Right.
You know, so what it does is it shortens and tightens it and creates pain. Because that's pain is a response from your nervous system telling you to stop.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had talked about it earlier, where someone like, hurts their ankle or knee or something, and then they have a hard time walking, and in fact the body might actually automatically compensate in a way
It
that
has to.
yeah, yeah. And so you've found with some of like the A&F, like you put some disc on intentionally, and people what would they walk more efficiently, or they have less pain, or what's that?
Both.
Both. Okay. And then I can imagine then when you're able to walk efficiently without the pain, the problem almost fixes itself afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the discs stay on for 72 hours.
Mm.
So it's basically like receiving therapy for like 3 days straight. And so I find usually you'll get like about an immediate 50% reduction in pain, sometimes even more. And then by the end of the 72 hours, you'll heal like a good percentage. I mean, if it's a really chronic issue, it can take a little bit more time, but typically I don't see people more than 5 or 6 times for an issue.
Wow.
Because I combine a lot of different therapies. Like I'll do the FSM combined with the NKT and the A&F and a little massage and some strength training. I mean, it's a winning combination, And what got me into studying all of those things is, I would work with somebody and I wouldn't quite get the results I was looking for. I'm like, what am I missing? And I would literally lose sleep over like, why couldn't I help that person? Like, what am I missing? And so I'm a stubborn bastard. I don't stop until I figure it out,
That's awesome. It's a relatable struggle. I mean, because I have people that I work with. I'm like, what
is it that we're missing? Right.
Yeah. There's
an emotional component.
Yeah.
I
mean,
food and emotions,
Yeah, yeah. And that tends to be the focus in a lot of like how we go about things, in our practice is like very behavioral, because, you can know you can know all the things. You can know exactly what foods, might be good and how to balance it. But the problem is like the implementation and crossing the behavioral and emotional gap that most people have. And so, people want to skip that step, even with you and like your breath work, MJ, people want to skip the mindfulness step, but you can't, because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but implementation is a behavioral and emotional problem rather than anything else. And so, so it's nice to hear other people recognize that, and hopefully we get to the place in healthcare where where we accept more of these kind of like holistic.
It's on the way. It's on the way.
Yeah.
You ever hear of Dr. Sebi?
No.
He was like sort of a holistic doctor. I don't know if he was ever actually like board certified, but he was from New York City, and he put an ad in the paper that I can heal. Come to me if you have AIDS or cancer, and I will heal you. And so they went after him for false claims until he brought in like over 300 clients who he healed of cancer and AIDS. Like AIDS is supposed to be incurable, right? It's not incurable. And he did it all with food, herbs, fasting, and just understanding the human body. Right. And one of the things that he said that I loved was, we're carbon-based. We're a carbon-based creature. Yeah. And so what's going to complement us through chemical affinity is carbon-based treatments, herbs, food, let food be thy medicine. Right. And when you're putting chemicals into your body, all it does is mask things. It doesn't really fix them. I mean, you might get lucky. But that's why this country is the sickest it's ever been. It's just because everything is pharmaceutical and chemicals and processed foods. Like, it's time to get that shit out.
Yeah.
So
There was a doctor at Harvard who developed a theory on heart disease, addressing the fact that it wasn't actually cholesterol that was causing heart disease, and even today, the mainstream synopsis of much of heart disease is that it's a disease of excess cholesterol and some other things, and yet. And even there's been large studies, so like Framingham Heart Study was one of them, massive nutrition study or focus, specifically on like lifestyle interventions, and found that when people had higher cholesterol, they were more likely to have like heart issues, diseases of the kind. However, what we now know is that and what this doctor was saying is that it wasn't actually the cholesterol that was the problem per se. It was what happens to the cholesterol in the blood. It's the oxidative stress that occurs on that cholesterol, and that damages things.
Right.
And so that means that essentially, if you're living kind of a balanced life and your cholesterol is high, then it's really not bad. It could be completely normal.
The numbers have been skewed.
Yeah, exactly. And they move the numbers all the time, and same thing with weight. They move they don't move the BMI all the time, but they moved them. Like, you're unhealthy now. It's like, well, it's hard with health to boil it down to one variable and say this is the thing that works, because our bodies are relying on a system, a very complex system where some things are synergies and some things are kind of like antagonistic. And so to focus on one thing and say, well, this is the be all end all, is really quite wrong. And that's what a lot of modern health and pharmaceuticals do. They focus on the cholesterol. They say, take the pill, bring down the cholesterol. But that doesn't actually solve the fact that
Right.
if you're having issues, it's because there's oxidative stress going around,
That's right.
and it's ignoring it. So I think it's kind of interesting to have these conversations and to see that, maybe holistic health is getting better. You can mention acupuncture, and they're doing that in cancer centers now, which is pretty cool. And we talked about the emotional freedom technique and how that has like really great studies, and I'm hearing about it more and more. You actually introduced me to that idea many years back,
Did I?
and I started
Okay.
doing some research. But all very interesting stuff. And then you're bringing up with your work like the mindfulness and the breath work and whatnot.
My mind is blown. There's so many. I could ask questions for the next 2 hours.
Sure.
I want to, actually.
Yeah.
But I think if you could just tell me a little bit more about how the interaction between the discs and the body work. Like, because when I think about,
I think I get what you're saying. Yeah.
go
The
ahead.
interaction being so it's bioharmonic.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can't tell you exactly what that means. I'm not a scientist. I just was trained in the discs and know how to use them pretty well. But like I was saying, we're frequencies, and so it's all generated from your brain through the nervous system, and we've got over 4 billion different frequencies going through our body at any given time, and so. Yeah, they'll just charge the discs with those individual frequencies, and different frequencies have different functions in the body. And so the interaction being like when I put the discs on something that's inflamed, that has inflammation, it literally just upregulates the nerve's ability to communicate to the muscles. And when the nerve starts to oscillate at the proper frequency, it detoxes the inflammation.
Okay, so we might have to cut this whole thing out because I could be completely mistaken. But
No cuts.
no cuts. Nope. If I could substitute the word frequency for vibration, can I do that for a second?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. If you were to, we know, like literally, I went for a run with a friend of mine recently, and she was saying that there's a new she's in the Pico. She's in like an intensive care unit, and there's a new way that they're putting people on ventilators, and it's essentially matching the vibration of your lungs to shake the AOLI, the small capsules, in order to get that to just release the fluid that's in there.
Right.
So I'm putting the two together in my own head that essentially, like, if you're able to match the area that's already vibrating with and help it vibrate to the degree that it's supposed to, it will, in essence, shake out.
That's exactly right.
All of the
well, that's what I mean by oscillation. It starts to vibrate. I do use that terminology actually when I'm trying to explain it to, like, they're like, oh, dude, that was just a 10 a second ago. Why is it like there's no more pain there? And I explain to them, like sort of the process of that.
Cool. So I'm putting it together at my.
But that's pretty much how I explain it to people. Yeah.
Cool. So it's all like making sense in my head, especially the more that I learn. And
it just shakes off the inflammation.
Yeah, that's and if we can extrapolate that one step further, you can do that anywhere, right? You can do that in your.
I've
So
treated everything.
Now that I'm caught up in my own head, talk a little bit, if you could, about how it makes sense, or how you want to be, what state of being you want to be in when you're having this stuff, right? I'm sure you'd want to be calm, right?
Are you talking about the client?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like just because it doesn't hurt anymore doesn't mean that the injury's complete. It's not a miracle. It's science.
Right.
So, a lot of times I'll tell somebody, like, just because you feel better doesn't mean go do more, Oh, you just sprained your ankle, it feels better, you can walk in it. Doesn't mean go play in a game. Although sometimes that happens if it's like a championship or a playoff game. And usually they're fine. They might have to come back one more time or something like that. But
cool.
Yeah, if you're trying to nurse an injury, the best thing to do is to kind of give it a little bit of rest,
For sure.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's all so cool, and yeah, I think we'll be looking back on these kinds of conversations in the future and saying, wow, these folks, they were a little bit ahead of their time, and not to build anyone up or get your head too big or our heads too big, but I think it's a better understanding of health that is not monetary focused. I mean, you're not making $50,000 per treatment or to do a surgery, and I'm not either.
Yeah. Oftentimes if somebody comes in and they can't afford it, I give a lot away.
That's the mark of
of
someone who cares, right?
Yeah.
I think healthcare providers.
It's good business.
You have to.
Referrals.
Yeah.
They're like, man, that guy just really helped me, and he was wonderful, and he was generous, and he gave me, he took care of me when I couldn't afford it. Like, it's not all about money.
Oh.
So I love this so much because it really wraps into like treating the whole person. And I know I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute on the healthcare side, because I've been thinking a lot about the mainstream healthcare. And I know in previous podcasts I've been very hard on it, but I've been thinking about it, like, so much of what we learned by individualizing each aspect of healthcare, like you're a foot doctor, you're an eye doctor, you're a lung doctor.
Yeah.
That's so positive. There's so much good there to have learned that, gone down that thing. And it's easy to see how if you just spent 10 years studying just the lung, that someone comes to you with an issue, you're like, I know what to do. We might need this pharmaceutical. We might need this. We might need that to bring this down, to fix this issue. And it's not, and I guess I'm openly stating I've come back around to understand that it's not for just money or just a nefarious reason that we've gone that way. There's so many good, there's so much good.
There is.
For sure.
But now that I'm seeing how when we go the other way, this whole person, right? You talked about the emotional body. You talked about the brain, the synapses, the nervous system. I mean, really the whole person. Like, now we get to add in these little pieces that we've learned from going this direction and say, like, wow, look what we can do now, right? And I think, to your point, like, we'll definitely be coming back around as a society soon to say, this is the way, with all this extra cool info that we've learned. So that's my one time. Well, I'll take it back. I'm always so hard on it because
You got to understand too, is just like doctors don't talk about nutrition anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I remember I don't know, it's not how appropriate it is, but my brother had cancer, and based on like pH, you know, if your body's at a certain pH, you can't, you know, cancer can't thrive in that environment, right?
Mm.
And so, but you know, my brother, I presented that information to my brother. He presented it to his doctor, and his doctor was like, "Yeah, I know that's not true. You can eat whatever you want. Oh, you want ice cream? Go ahead, eat ice cream." You know, there was just, I don't know, it's missing a lot, I believe. You know,
Yeah.
doctors used to be more encompassing. You know, I do think that it's cool that there's specialties. You know, you do have to have specialists in certain fields, but having a broader knowledge goes a long way.
Heck
you
yeah.
know?
And who would you want to see if you had any of those
Yeah.
challenges, right? You want to see someone
I
who
try
knows
not to get
all
in
about it?
Yeah, if you do, yeah. The best thing to do is don't get in those situations, you know.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
Too much information is harmful. So that's
That's
the
true, too.
benefit of specialization, right? In all areas. But then again, it's nice to have a person who understands all of that, right? Such
Or
as
at least they'll know what they don't know and send you to the right person. Like if I
Right.
can't help somebody, a lot of times I know where to send them.
Right. Right. Yeah, like if you had someone who's like really struggling with nutrition, probably doesn't make sense to, you know, to give it to you refer to, you know, other people. Maybe it makes sense to refer to me now. But to a dietitian or someone who at least can match your understanding in some way and complement it well,
Yep.
right? And you mentioned like most doctors don't have nutrition training, which is true actually. The Association of American Medical Schools put out a figure that says only 6% of doctors receive training on nutrition beyond their basic training. So
Right.
6% are maybe appropriately educated, which is really wild. A lot of doctors will give kind of like lip service to lifestyle interventions, assuming that people won't make the lifestyle changes necessary to be healthy. Yet that's the most important part of being healthy. Preventative care is where health happens, and when you're playing catch up on all these other issues, muscular or neurological or whatever it might be, you it's so much harder. It's
Yeah.
so much harder.
Yep.
So then actually on that topic, preventative, what's that like for you?
Eat well, exercise, get rest.
Yeah. 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 I like it.
Meaningful relationships,
Yeah. Well
you
said.
know.
Well said. Yeah. Good. Do you have any other like kind of like last questions and last topics you want to touch on?
One more question, maybe oddly self-serving. What's an assessment look like? Come in, I'm a new
Palpation.
patient.
Oh, so what's your problem? Like, why are you here to see me?
I'm gonna
My
do it.
shoulder hurts. Let me touch that shoulder. Maybe do some muscle tests to see, you know, if the rotators are firing. I can test any muscle in your body, and it's usually half an hour, depending if it's just like one appendage, a shoulder. It's, you know, but if you're coming to see me with a knee, a shoulder, and a back and a neck, an hour. It's very fast.
Cool. Awesome. And then you kind of put together a plan, talk about things that make somebody go, what their
Yep.
lifestyle's like.
Yep,
These are the things
I'm
we-
constantly emailing people corrective exercises.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do it right in order, like release this, activate this, release this, activate this, you know.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to share?
No, I don't think so. I think that's about it. I think we covered a lot of bases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
Thank you for the education.
yeah, appreciate it. Yeah,
No.
thanks so much. Yeah. Well, if you want to check out our other podcasts, check it out on Spotify. We will have Brian's handle here down below, so you can check out Fairhaven Wellness. Go give him a follow, and maybe even check him out if you have any other issues that need to be solved. But otherwise, we'll see you next time.